Pippity Squeak, written and read by Shan McFadden. Pippity Squeak was a mouse who lived in a house where humans lived too. And Pippity Squeak was ever so meek, so he never complained about the things they would do. He didn't protest when they stayed up all night, playing trombones. No, he was far too polite. And even when they would guffaw with delight, he didn't say anything that might start a fight. They'd start beating on drums and yodeling too, and clanging their bowls while they ate their beef stew, and playing loud music and shouting, "Yoo-hoo!" and banging their tools while they fixed their canoes, and shouting, "Hi-ya!" while they practiced kung fu. And while dressing for bed, they'd drop each of their shoes. Bam went one shoe, and then bam went shoe two. But Pippity Squeak, oh so mild and meek, would sit in his mouse hole and cover his ears and pretend not to hear, and hum and sing and do anything, just to block out the noise and the dreadful commotion. But then, with emotion, he stood up and said, "Enough is enough, I must have my say. I must do what's right at the end of the day." So he took a small pencil and a small paper scrap and wrote a small note, and then, with a tap, he nailed that small note to their door with a pin. And on that small note was a message within, and the message said, "Neighbors, understand please, I don't mean to fuss, but there is a problem which we must discuss. It relates to the noise and the hours you keep. It's making it difficult for me to sleep. So please, if you would, try to lower the clatter. I hope this is all I must say on this matter." And the note sat unread on the front of their door until one windy day at about 4:30, Pippity saw that the note was no more. So he folded his arms and gave a soft sigh and said, "They've read it, I see, and now they know why. I've been so upset, and I'm sure that they'll try to be much more considerate and quiet and kind." But later that evening, at just after 9, guests started arriving, and after a time, the whole house was full of loud party guests, and Pippity Squeak could get simply no rest. Oh, they shouted and hooted and whoop-whooped and tooted their party noise-makers and horns and kazoos until Pippity Squeak didn't know what to do. "They ignored me," he said, his voice full of resentment. "They don't care if I'm bothered. They don't care if I meant it. When I asked them if they would please keep down the clamor, these ridiculous humans have absolutely no manners. Well, they've pushed me so far that I cannot ignore it. I hate all this noise. Yes, I simply abhor it." So Pippity Squeak, feeling much less than meek, took his small pencil, and with it he wrote on a small paper scrap a short note, and that note was simply one word, not one less or one more, and that one simple word was just this one word: war. And beneath that word war he signed his full name, and then rolled up that note and then set it aflame. With a spare pack of matches he kept in his den, and he tossed that note out in the living room. Then he said to himself, "Let the battle begin." First he chewed out the eyes on their family portraits, and then nibbled his way through their albums and scrapbooks. He scratched all their CDs and ate all their snacks. But the party continued, and no one looked back. To see a small mouse with a very full belly and a look on his face from which you could tell he had had the most awful, outrageous of thoughts. Pippity smirked and then snickered and sneered, and then rubbed his round tummy and then gave a Bronx cheer. Then he crept quietly out to the hall and then pooped in their shoes. Yes, he pooped in them all. Every boot, shoe, and sneaker, every sandal and pump were now overflowing with little black lumps. Next, he climbed up the door where the cool evening air had left condensation on the windowpane there, and using his tail like the tip of a pen, he wrote a short message, and finishing then, the last thing he did was to chew all the wires that powered their speakers, and feeling inspired, he chewed all the cords that lit up their lamps, so the loud party-goers could no longer dance, and without their lights they could no longer see. But Pippity Squeak simply giggled with glee and said, "See what can happen when you disregard me?" And the smoldering note that he'd tossed on the carpet now burst into flame and spread across the rug, but it didn't stop there. It rose right up the walls, and the guests gave a shriek and a cry and a call. "Fire!" they shouted. "Come on, let's get out!" They lurched through the smoke with cacophonous shouts. They made their escape, but the hallway was dark. They slipped on their shoes, and one made this remark, "I feel something so awful, so squishy, so vile, it stuck to my toes and my heel." And then while they continued to fumble with foul-filled shoes, one reached inside and said, "I think this is poo. And look at the photos. Oh, look at their eyes. They've all been chewed out, and I have to surmise that this is the work of a ghost or a ghoul." Another guest gasped and said, "Quiet, you fool, and look at the door, there's a message on there." And the other guests stopped, and they stood and they stared. Spelled out on the glass on the moist window pane were 6 letters, 2 words with a meaning arcane. The words that were written with Pippity's tail. The words said, "Get out." And so then without fail the humans did just what was said, and they fled out into the night to never return. And all through the night the fire did burn. Late the next morning, when the flames had died out, Pippity Squeak with a yawn looked about the remains of the house that he'd once had to share. But now there were no longer humans in there. It was just an old burnt-out shell of a home. And no one was there. He was simply alone. No bumping, no thumping, no banging, no clanging, no loud tutors tooting, no shrill fluters fluting, no music, no singing, no bing-banging bongs, no crashing or bashing or ding-danging dongs. No, nothing was heard, not the tiniest peep, and that sat just fine with Pippity Squeak. He folded his arms and said, "That's just how I like it. It may not look nice, but at least it is quiet." Written and read by Shan McFadden. Music by Audionautics.com.